A dwarf mandarin tree that looks so beautiful and produces delicious small fruits. Let's look at growing the dwarf mandarin Kishu. So January is a good time to start citrus trees if you're buying the trees. Now you can also start citrus trees from seeds, but they do take a long time to give fruits. So I recommend that you buy a good grafted plant like this one that you see here and use this kind of a large container to grow your dwarf citrus trees. Now you can even plant your dwarf citrus trees in the ground, like you saw with the other citrus trees we are growing, like the Dancy tangerine. Now the potting mix that I'm using is just standard potting mix. I'm not creating my own using peat moss, and there is a reason. This dwarf citrus requires a soil pH which is neutral. Now if you add a lot of peat moss, your soil becomes acidic, and then you add some garden lime to neutralize the acidity of the peat moss. So in this case what I've done is I've just used regular potting soil, potting mix, and then I'm just gonna be adding more mix till I see that the plant will fit into the larger pot. And then you just tap around the pot just like that, the container that you got your plant in. And a grafted tree is something that has a rootstock, which is a citrus plant which grows pretty strong, something like citron, which not many people like to eat, though it's healthy. But the rootstock of citron is pretty strong, so they use it for most citrus trees. And what is done here is we've grafted, the store has grafted a Kishu Mandarin plant onto this rootstock. And as you can see here, we get this plant which will produce delicious Kishu mandarins. Now I'm trying to seat the plant in the larger pot. Now if you don't have a very large pot, that's still okay. But just make sure you give the plant a little bit of growing room so that during at least the first year of planting, the roots get some space to grow out. Now just keep adding more soil around the plant till it gets full, and that completes the bulk of your soil addition for your container. And then watering is very important. As soon as you plant, water to make sure that all the air pockets are closed. And at this time you can add a liquid fertilizer if you want to. I did not do that because the potting mix that I used does have some nutrients, so I'm not going to be adding any more fertilizer here. And I kept it at a sunny location where you get at least about 6 to 8 hours of sun. And I'll shortly go into the sunlight requirements for the citrus plant. But try to use a container that you have, which is slightly larger than the one you got. And here you can see I had to transplant this plant into a different container due to some arrangements I was making in my side yard. But as you can see here, this mandarin plant looks pretty healthy, and by April it grew into a pretty large size plant. And you can see here this is partial shade. This pot gets about 6 hours of sun every day, and the citrus trees that produce sweet fruit like the mandarins, the oranges, they need at least 6 hours of sun. Now if you're growing Meyer lemons or some other sour lemons that are not sweet, any citrus that's not sweet, you can get by with lesser sunlight, maybe like 4 hours would be okay. But for any sweet fruits, you need a lot of sunlight because it's that sunlight that really makes the fruit sweet. As you can see here, in the month of March, the following year, the plant is now flowering like crazy. And this plant produced a lot of flowers. I know I have other YouTube viewers that have mentioned that they had the Kishu Mandarin and it was flowering like crazy. And I can completely relate to them. This plant had a lot of flowers. And in the end of April, the flowers had turned into small fruits, as you can see here. A lot of small fruits all around the citrus plant. Now you need to make sure that you add fertilizer to your citrus plants very well starting February. And I recommend that you watch my video on fertilizing citrus plants, fruit trees, so that you can get an idea of when to add fertilizer for your citrus plants. Now, as far as insects go, there is one big enemy of all citrus plants, and that is the leaf miner. And the leaf miner will devastate your citrus plants. So make sure that if you do get a leaf miner attack, follow the video that is there in your screen right now. You will be able to counter leaf miners. This Kishu Mandarin plant is a dwarf plant. It doesn't really grow that big. It grows more like a shrub than a tree. And I always advise my viewers, my fellow gardeners, to buy dwarf trees so that you optimize your space in your garden. Dwarf trees give a lot of harvest. You'll get an abundant harvest while not taking up a lot of space. Now, unless you are in a tropical or subtropical area, you have to grow your citrus plants in containers, because although they tolerate cold well, they will not survive a hard freeze. So it's better that you plant your citrus plants in containers if you're living in an area that gets a freezing winter. And while the fruits are ripening, you can see that 1 or 2 fruits may die and fall off, and that's perfectly fine. There is a limit to how many fruits the plant can produce. Now, by the time it's August, you've seen that the fruits have become slightly larger, and this plant doesn't produce very large fruits. It produces fruits that are small, actually small, not even medium. I won't even call them as medium sized, at least not in the first year. But what I have read about this mandarin plant is that it produces slightly larger fruits as it grows bigger. So I'm going to wait and see for the second year how this plant produces. But these are still decently sized fruits. Maybe not for adults, but the kids absolutely love it. It's very easy for them to peel these fruits and just gobble them. These are seedless. There's no seeds inside them. Kids absolutely love it. They just can harvest it right off the plant and then just skin them very easily and then pop them in their mouth. So the kids really like it. You can even give these kind of mandarins as a good snack to your kids while they go to school. And even otherwise, when you're hanging out in the garden with such an abundance of fruits in just this small container, you can imagine how much fun the kids have. And here I'm going to show you, by peeling this fruit, you can see how thin the skin is. Extremely thin skinned fruit. And inside the mandarin, you can see that it's pretty small and you can pretty much eat them as whole. But they still have the shape of a standard orange fruit. You can even split the pieces and eat them. And they're absolutely sweet. They taste absolutely sweet and delicious. Just wait for them to ripen on the vine. As with all citrus plants, sweet citrus, the earlier you harvest the fruit, the more sour they're going to be. But if you let them ripen on the vine properly, on the tree properly, then you can expect to get some really good harvests of some delicious fruits. And watering your container generally depends on how hot it is in your area, and what you see on your screen is a general guideline. And as you can see here, towards the end of the season, which is in January, after 2 years, the citrus plant has produced slightly larger fruits towards the end of the harvest season. And this is the best time to harvest this fruit, which is somewhere around January. That's when you get the sweetest fruit. So I think we covered all aspects of growing this lovely dwarf mandarin called Kishu. I would like to know from you whether you have tried growing any dwarf citrus trees and what are your favorites. Do you like growing dwarf trees or do you like growing the full-size trees? And let me know why do you think each choice is better than the other. And if you'd like me to try growing a different citrus variety in my garden, please do let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, do give us a thumbs up and we'll see you again soon. Happy gardening.